All right. Welcome, everyone. It's the August 14th meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission that we'll call to order now. First up, we have roll call.
Jared Gardner,
Here.
Radhika Krishna,
Here.
Jim Winchester, Scott Polis,
Here.
Jeff Ron,
Here.
Brandy Eber,
Here.
Daniel George,
Here.
Greg Strike,
Here.
Andre Spinelli is excused. You have a quorum. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next item is our minutes from the July 10th meeting. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes? Moved by Commissioner Eber, seconded by Commissioner Winchester. Are there any discussion? Is there any discussion, or are there any corrections? Are there any objections to approving the minutes? Hearing none, the minutes are approved. Next up, we will do disclosures. I'll just ask any members of the commission to speak up if they have disclosures on the items on our agenda. Are there any disclosures? Hearing none, we'll move on to our public hearings. First up, I'll read the procedure by which the public may speak to the commission. After the staff presentation is completed on public hearing items, the chair will ask for public testimony on the issue. Persons who wish to testify will follow the time limits established in the commission rules of procedure. Petitioners, including all his or her representatives, receive 10 minutes. Part of this time may be reserved for rebuttal. Representatives of groups such as community councils and PTAs will receive 5 minutes, and individuals will receive 3 minutes. When your testimony is complete, you may be asked questions by the commission. You may only testify once on any issue unless questioned by the commission. Any party of interest wishing to appeal shall first file with the planning director within 7 days of the commission's decision made on the record a written notice of intent to appeal in accordance with AMC 21-03050A4A. Commission recommendations to the Anchorage Assembly are not appealable. Following approval of the written findings of fact and decision, any party of interest may, within 20 days, file an appeal by filing a notice of appeal and paying the appeal fee and deposit in accordance with Section 21.03.050. The notice of appeal must be filed with the planning director in a form prescribed by the municipality. If the appellant is not the applicant, the appellant's notice of appeal shall include proof of service on the applicant. First, we have case 2023-0059. May we hear the staff presentation, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sean O'Dell with the Planning Department, reading for Elizabeth Appleby. The 35% design study report, abbreviated as the DSR, is for Mountain Air Drive Extension Project. There is an existing northern 400-foot segment of Mountain Air Drive serving a fire station and Bear Valley Elementary School, and an existing 2,100-foot southern segment serving residential neighborhoods. This project would connect these existing segments so that Mountain Air Drive would be extended from Rabbit Creek Road to Sandpiper Drive. This project would provide emergency and secondary access, as well as improve vehicular traffic safety and add non-motorized facilities. This is the second step in the Context-Sensitive Solutions Transportation Project review process. After the Planning and Zoning Commission's review, the project will go before the Urban Design Commission to complete the third and final step of the CSS Transportation Project review process with the municipality. The Commission had postponed their deliberations on this case from July 10th so that a public hearing may be held tonight before a decision is made. The primary decision of the Commission for the DSR is of the alternatives for the project. The DSR for the Mountain Air Drive extension describes a no-build alternative, route alternative A, and route alternative B. The preferred alternative is alternative 2, alignment A, direct route. There are 13 topic areas to be included but not limited to in the Commissioner's deliberations. The topic areas are existing conditions, design standards, alternatives, compliance with Title 21, long-term, short-term impacts or land use, and right-of-way acquisition, utility and infrastructure impacts, street illumination, maintenance, environmental constraints, non-motorized access, public involvement, and cost. Based on the 13 topic areas and information included in the DSR, the Planning Department recommends approval of Preferred Alternative 2, Alignment A, Direct Route, subject to conditions 1 through 4 in the staff packet. The condition of approval will require the project to meet municipal street and intersection lighting standards, address queuing concerns near Bear Valley Elementary School with traffic engineering, and require a wider right-of-way width to meet collector standards. The Alaska Department of Transportation and their representatives are here tonight to speak to the project. Tonight is also a public hearing, so members of the public and organizations will have time to comment on the project. Thank you, and as I mentioned, the project leads here tonight. Thank you.
Are there any questions for staff? Seeing none, may we hear from the petitioner?
Hi, my name is Alex Reed. I'm a project manager with DOT. With me is Stephanie Marmello. She is a project manager with HDL Consultants. Today we're going to be presenting the AMATS Mountain Air Drive Extension project. I'll do a quick introduction of the team, and then I'll go through the project status and updates, and then I'll take any questions you guys have. This is a partnership between the Alaska DOT and the municipality of Anchorage. The project management from the municipality of Anchorage has been consulted out to the Boutte Company. Also on our team is HDL Engineering Consultants providing design support, and Huddle Alaska assisting with the public involvement. This is a federally funded project through the AMATS program. That's going to come up a lot as I'm going through this. There's some limitations that come along with the project being federally funded. The project will extend Mountain Air Drive from Rabbit Creek Road in the north there to Sandpiper Drive in the south. It's currently and will be owned and operated by the municipality of Anchorage. The purpose of the project is to provide access, particularly emergency access, along with non-motorized transportation, particularly to Bear Valley Elementary School, which is adjacent to the project. When looking at this project, we looked primarily at 3 different routes, kind of going in reverse order here. Route C goes back behind Bear Valley Elementary School. That's centered within mostly existing right-of-way. Route B, it's kind of outside existing right-of-way and in existing right-of-way, kind of a mix between A and C. And then Route A, which is the most direct route between the existing north and south portion of the road. Looked at a lot of different criteria between the different routes. One of the main ones is the wetland impacts. As a federally funded project, we impact the least amount of wetlands when feasible. And that particular route would be Route A, has the least amount of wetland impacts while also serving the purpose and need of the project. There's a lot of other criteria that are in favor of Route A as well. It has the safest roadway geometry of any of the routes, has a single water crossing as opposed to the other 2, and as I said before, it's the most direct route, which will have the lowest maintenance costs into the future. Proposed work for this project may include a new roadway between Rabbit Creek Road and Sandpiper Drive, a multi-use non-motorized pathway and ADA improvements, intersection improvements at Rabbit Creek Road, drainage improvements, water crossing at Little Rabbit Creek that will either be a bridge or a very large culvert, right-of-way acquisitions, signage and other roadway hardware, and utility work. The typical section consists of 10-foot lanes, 1 in each direction, 4-foot shoulders, an 8-foot multi-use pathway that's offset with a 7-foot buffer, and then, of course, ditches on each side. This is our project schedule. We actually just finished up our environmental document phase, and we're transitioning into the design and right-of-way acquisition phase. It'll take us approximately 3 years, and then we're looking at construction in 2027, 2028. That is dependent both on available funding and how quickly we can get through the right-of-way acquisitions. As I mentioned, for environmental tasks, we just finished up the environmental document along with the various studies that go along with that. The design is currently at 35%, and we are working on getting ready to distribute our 35% design to the Municipality of Anchorage and DOT public facilities for review. We also have some ongoing coordination with the Anchorage School District regarding access and circulation. We've done quite a bit of public involvement for this project already. There's been, including this one, 11 different public events. This will be the 7th one this year. We've presented multiple times to the Bear Valley Community Council and the Rabbit Creek Community Council. In 2021, we had a virtual public meeting. We presented at the Anchorage Transportation Fair earlier this year. We presented to both the AMATS Technical and Policy Committee this year, and we had a project open house for the project at Golden View in April, and then of course the meeting today. We'll continue to have open houses for the project as it develops and be at the transportation fairs. Questions can always be sent to me at alexreed@alaska.gov. We also have a project website. It's mountainairdrive.com. There's more information there, graphics that you can see for the project, all the material we had at previous public events. And with that, are there any questions?
Thank you. You have 4 minutes reserved for rebuttal. Commissioner Strike?
Yes, thank you, and through the chair. Thank you for the presentation. A couple of questions. You mentioned owned and operated, so that's, I mean, maintained by the Municipality of Anchorage, this road would be, is that correct?
Yes, the Municipality of Anchorage is responsible for maintenance of the road facility. They have that performed by the South Golden View Rural Road Service area.
Okay, and I think that's where I was going, because it's the city currently maintaining any other roads, let's call it south of Rabbit Creek currently, or will this be part of a road district, be wrapped into a road district for maintenance purposes?
It is into the South Golden View Road.
Okay, so who also maintains the Sandpiper Road? Who does the maintenance there?
It's South Golden View.
Same group?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Ron?
Thank you, through the chair. Interested in learning more about the roadway geometry and proposed alignment as is for option A, and most specifically, was there an attempt to totally avoid those Class B wetlands by shifting to the west, and if not, why?
We would have to shift quite a bit out of the existing right-of-way, and it would significantly increase the amount of right-of-way impacts if we did do that. We did change and play with the geometry quite a bit to avoid it as much as possible. But the...
We also considered the alignment of the bridge or
Oh.
water crossing when you're looking at the potential crossing of Little Rabbit Creek.
Yeah, if you can, it's kind of hard to see on the display there, but that blue line that says Little Rabbit Creek Road is where the bridge is crossing, and that's one of the best places to cross and construct a bridge without impacting the floodplain and actually having a bridge that's, constructible. So that was also kind of a fixed point. So we had a fixed point there, we have a fixed point between the existing on each end, and that's a route that we kind of minimize the impacts as much as possible, yeah.
Commissioner Strike?
Thank you, and again, through the chair. As noted on the map here, is most of this course identified, whether A or B, through primarily all undeveloped lands?
The wetlands, are you asking if
Well,
they're
the
on undeveloped?
wetlands I understand, but is it, I know that this area by developers they've been trying to connect this road now for at least probably 10, 15 years. This has been a long course of action. And they've been stymied along the way, wetlands being one of them, costs being another. But as this property goes through and you're looking at acquiring the right-of-ways, probably from some of these same potential developers or holders of lands along the way, does the same group that's been trying to get a road through here, possibly, maybe we'll hear differently, do you foresee problems? Is there receptive, do you see a problem getting the right-of-ways without eminent domain or whatever other course of action you might take?
So we're still pretty early in the design phase. We haven't actually started our right-of-way yet, so I can't say for sure what the issues are going to be or what exactly the right-of-way is going to be, but we've universally got support for the project for every public meeting we've had, and that's including with some of the property owners that are impacted by this. There is a preference by some of the property owners to go more around, which is what Route B would do, because it provides more access to some of those properties. So yes, we've heard some of those comments, and yes, it was an issue in a previous project. There's a lot of reasons to go with A, and I think.
Okay. What about the grade of the road through either with either option? Is there a grade variance?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Our max grade, I believe, is 7, right? Percent?
No, it goes up to 10.
Oh, it's 10, I'm sorry. 10% is our max grade on it, and there would be extreme grades with kind of both routes there. There's a pretty big drop between the north and south.
Which one has more grade variance, A or B?
I do not know that off the top of my head. Being that they connect at the same point, I mean, you're dropping the same amount, but B is longer, so you'd be able to kind of distribute that.
A 10% grade is near impassable in the winter. That's steep. That's
10%.
that's more than Potter.
10% is standard for the area up there, and it's pretty normal on roads on that.
Because I know when they
hillside.
put in Potter, I think it was limited to 7%.
That grade,
And that grade has created problems.
and say, the 10% grades along the corridor, my name is Stephanie Mormillo. It is primarily along the existing southern section of Mountain Air Drive that's from Sandpiper to the cul-de-sac, where we're trying to closely match the grades that are there so that we do not have significant impacts to the adjacent private properties. So those are the areas, because there is an existing road and those were the grades that were designed at that time, that is where we actually exceed those standards.
I guess I wouldn't hold out an old design done probably in the 60s and 70s as a standard to try to uphold, but that's for a different discussion. Thank you.
Yeah.
Are there any further questions from the commission? Not seeing any, we will move to open to public testimony. Okay. Yes, are there any members of the public wishing to testify? Yes, please go ahead.
Sometimes us short folks have to make adjustments here. Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Judith Michael, and we have property that will be directly affected by this road. I would like to make a few comments about this. We were here, and as some of them already know, 10 years ago, 11 years ago, in the previous project. The Mountain Air Drive extension has been a long time in coming. Property we own, adjacent to the proposed road, is part of our family's original homestead. And in fact, Mountain Air Drive was platted and paid for as required by what is now the MOA, and by my late father-in-law, Wes Michael. That right-of-way was carefully designed and with hopes that the future generations would be able to use it as a transportation corridor to open up this area of the hillside for succeeding generations. In reading the current project details, the reality is that little has changed from the project efforts more than a decade ago, except that the initial funding is from the Federal Highway Administration now. Much of the project documentation does not reflect much of anything new. The planners still refuse to build Mountaineer Drive using a route along existing dedicated right-of-way, which is Route B. Instead, they want to take private land to build a road along a different route, but which would begin and end at the same place. Taking the private land will remove private properties from the tax rolls of the municipality forever, and they've already got money problems. So, in addition, the A route will require a very expensive bridge spanning a deep canyon, and it will have a significant slope. While this route may be somewhat straighter, it will still be more steep than any crossing used by the B route. The B route bridging could likely be done with culverts. It would be a much less expensive option than bridging needed for the A route. Another comment about the A route bridge is that it will come down a slope going directly in front of an elementary school. It'll be slick. Someone made a comment, well, the kids could walk to school. I wouldn't have my kid walking on a bridge like that in a million years. No, thank you. The B route bridging could probably be done with culverts, as I've said. We have suggested using traffic calming measures on a B route such that the two so-called 90-degree curves that they refer to could be softened by discussing other property that could be used to accomplish a more gentle curve for this, two gentle curves, in fact. The Route B was dedicated and paid for by the Michaels. The municipality already owns it. The B route better incorporates existing right-of-way, accomplishes the objectives to reach the stated goals of access, egress, safety, and reaching the Sandpiper connection, all at a comparable price.
That's your 3 minutes. Thank you.
Okay. May I make one more sentence, please?
A member of the commission is free to...
Yeah, I appreciate your testimony, Mrs. Michael, and the time that you've spent out there. And I think you had another comment that you wanted to continue with.
The only thing I wanted to say was that none of the two private property owners involved are against this road. We are not against it. All we ask is that a more reasonable route be chosen.
Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I'm not seeing any. Thank you. Are there any other members of the public wishing to testify?
I will do my level best to keep this as brief as I can. My name is James Michael. I'm a lifelong resident of the area. I'm third generation living on the property, second generation born and raised on the property, and I'm currently raising the third generation on there. I'm very, very intimately familiar with both the A and B routes. I was involved in the most recent, during the public involvement process with touring the property with multiple members of the engineering project management team and DOT.PUF and other people and such. There are a couple of concerns that I have about the project. I very much desperately think this project needs to be done. There are access issues back in that area, and it is developing rapidly. And unless these issues get addressed, it's going to eventually become a matter of not if there is an emergency that costs lives and considerable money, it's going to be a matter of when. The McHugh Creek fire some years back was a pretty big wake-up call to the kind of needs we have up in that area for fire access and egress. According to the paperwork that was submitted regarding this project, it is stated the primary purpose of the project is for emergency vehicle access and disaster egress for residential neighborhoods south of Rabbit Creek Road and east of Golden View Drive. And while I do agree that this would accomplish that with A or B route, I would maintain that the B route does set up much more cost-effective means to connect into places like Jamie. The A route will allow for that connection as well, but it does increase the amount of distance that has to be crossed to connect to it. And I would point out that if you drop one tree on Clark's Road, nobody in Bear Valley is getting out until it's moved. You can shut down that entire area by blocking one road. They have no back door. And the A route will not give them a back door, and it will make, it appears to me to be something that's going to make it a lot more cost prohibitive to make that future connection. I do believe eventually it will go regardless, simply because it will be needed, but I'm concerned that this project, if it goes the A route, is not going to help that at all. I have personal disagreements about whether or not some of the property that's described as wetlands is, or at least is as wet as the degree that it is being decided as it is, has been determined to be, because I've walked on it personally in tennis shoes after a very rainy winter, or rainy summer, or a very wet winter, and it's relatively speaking dry. I don't have to hop over any water. I'm not walking through marsh. But I want to finish by maintaining, I really do believe this project desperately needs to be built for the area for emergency access and egress.
Thank you.
Hi. Oh. Regarding this project, I think that we need to overall be building less road connections and be building more rail connections. The excessive construction of car-centric developments in this city is quite disappointing, because all the way back, even in the 70s, the city was walkable, but since then it's become less and less walkable. Well, it is far less safe to walk in Anchorage than it was back then, which I consider to be a downgrade from the past. So whatever we do, we need to build less of these road connections, build more subways, build more bike paths, especially more tram connections, because those are how you reduce pedestrian fatalities from car accidents. That is how you do that. You have to add alternatives to driving. That's also how you reduce congestion. Building more road connections doesn't actually reduce congestion, because that creates more demand for cars. So those roads get more and more full. Even if you build a new one, it gets full. By adding more trams, you reduce the amount of cars on the road, and therefore you make the city as a whole safer. Thank you.
Could you say your name for the record?
My name is Jeremy Wilton, for the record.
And before you begin, could you say and spell your name for the record?
Good evening. My name is David. Last name is Michael, like a common first name, M-I-C-H-A-E-L. And I would like to speak to the Mountaineer Drive project. I have looked through the packet that I think each of you have, And some of that, I've found some, what I think are discrepancies or things that maybe need to be reconsidered. To open up, though, I guess I need to say that I am very supportive of Mountain Air Drive. It is needed in the hillside area for transportation. It is needed for egress and access for emergency vehicles. It is needed for residents that live there and for the area, as well as future expansion. The future expansion can be accomplished, in my opinion, better by using the B route, which has been suggested, but I don't think is being really considered. I don't believe it is from what I've read and heard and talked to different people about. The one route will achieve access due south to the Shangri-La area. The B route will achieve the exact same destination. It will be about 30 seconds longer and in much better ground than crossing a very deep canyon with a big bridge. Although it is not part of this project, it will set the stage for a connection to Bear Valley within about 1/4 of a mile. And the 1/4 of a mile is not through wetlands or bad soil. It's not great gravel bed and all of that, but it is not going through wetlands. I understand that that's not part of this project, but it still would be the next step. My family homesteaded in the area in the early 50s, and I grew up there, and as a result, I have a lot of firsthand knowledge of the area, knowledge of born experience. Our fourth generation is still living on the property, different parts of it, not all in our house, hopefully, sometimes. I own the property, as well, along with my wife, that will be directly affected. I am also the trustee for a portion of the land, in fact, the major effect for a trust lot that has been set up, and I am the trustee for that. I have looked at the packet, and as I say, I have found some things that may need some more consideration. The future connect to Bear Valley being one of them, 1/4 of a mile.
Excuse me, that was your
Thank you,
3
ma'am.
minutes for
I
testimony.
appreciate your consideration. I wish I had more time to speak. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to work with you on that now or in the future at any time.
Thank you for your testimony. Oh,
Thank you, ma'am.
could you hold on? I see we have a question from the commission. Commissioner Poulos?
I was just going to note that if he has some actual discrepancies he thinks exist in the document, we would probably like to hear that, keeping it short.
I'm having a hard time hearing you, I'm sorry.
If you have a list of discrepancies you think exist, we would like to hear that.
I don't have it all right now written out, but I have read through here, and there are several things that have to do with wetlands that are placed on maps, questions like that do not exist. I can expand briefly on it if you'd like a little bit. For instance, on the B route, on some maps that are shown here, there are wetlands that are shown as B or yellow wetlands. Some of those wetlands were not natural wetlands. They were created probably over 40 years ago by the school district. Initially, the school district came to my mother, who owned the property at that time, asked for an easement at the east end of the property, the east end of the trust lots, which would be on the section line, Hillside Drive, I think, on the map officially. I went and talked to them and told them that we would work with them in any way we could and we would not fight them. I did have one question. How are you going to make water run uphill? What kind of a pump are you going to use? They didn't give me a very good answer. Then I asked them, why do you want to do that and try to make water run uphill when there is a right-of-way that is already drawn into the plat that belongs to you? You don't have to purchase it. and it was designed by an engineer and surveyor and myself. They asked, I didn't know what they were doing at the time, I was a kid. They asked me, where does the water go? And I said, it goes right down there. So that's where they put the easement, which was not at the far end of the property. When Bear Valley School was being built, I walked over that way and said, oh, see how the project is going, just watching. And I found a digging machine, a backhoe shovel type thing that was digging a ditch. I went up and talked to the guy and asked him, what are you doing? He said, I'm digging a drainage ditch here. And I said, the drainage ditch is about 100 feet that way. That's already dedicated. This is not a drainage ditch. Oh, no, I'm just a contractor. Okay. So he went back to talk, and he said, we got it fixed. We moved down. That's where we'll put at the drainage ditch, which is in existence now, today, in operation. We'll go back and fix the ditch that we dug. They didn't. I really didn't feel that I had any responsibility for it. Also, it was not on my property. It was in the middle of the dedicated right-of-way. It's still there. And it's now being shown as a big yellow spot on your map. There are that, and there are other things that I think that I would like to discuss with you, maybe at a better time for all of us. That with the connection, with some of the, I don't want to say discrepancies, but questionable things in the design report that you have, I think that there's some things that should be considered, and I appreciate your time and your consideration. And once again, to end, we are not opposed in any way. It is very much needed to have a road built in there for that area for the reasons I did. Emergencies, general transportation, expanding the new hillside area, or that new area of the hillside. Also, if it goes the A route, it's going to take some very, very nice property, several acres, right off of the tax rolls. I don't think money is the big thing about this, but it will take buildable property that is very, very nice, that the trust owns, and then the second landowner, which I don't speak for them, but it'll also take a big chunk of their property also, off of the tax rolls. I thank you for your time and information. If there are any further questions.
I'm not seeing any further questions. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you for your consideration.
Is there anyone else wishing to testify? Seeing no one else in person, I believe we have some people on the phone.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think the clerk needs to hand control over Lori. It doesn't have to be able to dial. Oh, it's on.
Your call cannot be completed as dialed. Please.
Hello, is this Diane Holmes?
It is.
This is the Planning and Zoning Commission calling for public testimony in case 2023-59. Are you testifying as an individual or representing a group?
Yes, I am an individual. Someone else will be testifying, I hope, for the council.
Yes. Okay, you have 3 minutes. Please state your full name and you can begin.
This is Diane Holmes, and I'd just like to expand on some things that the Rabbit Creek Council has in your packet in a 4-page letter, which I hope you got. And it's unfortunate the staff was not able to use it. I guess it got in a bit late. But I live near this Mountaineer Drive, and it is very fortunate that a few years ago the city voted to spend some money on 3 emergency access roads across the city, and one of them was Mountaineer Drive, although our council and the residents had wanted to have this secondary access for a long time. And there are some things that I believe should be emphasized, and that is it is important for secondary access for us and a large part of southeast Anchorage, that part of which has not been developed. One thing we'd like you to keep in mind, and the posted speed, we wanted it to have 25 miles per hour with at the school zone, less with flashing lights, and so we wouldn't have the same kind of accidents that they had on when that young girl was killed at Henshaw a couple years ago. The other things that we would like to emphasize is that although DOT says they can't put 2 paths, one paved and one not, one on each side of the road, I think that really they at least could leave the right of way, so that we would. It's necessary, I think, for safety to have 2. And we do approve of not having curb and gutters, because that they only get knocked up and destroyed by snow plows, and it does not. It's not beneficial in this area to have curb and gutters. What is then left out is that there's a mistake, because some of the guiding documents were not cited. Hillside District Plan and the non-motorized plan from 2021, and the Hillside Sub-Area Transportation Study in 2006. And that's in the 4-page letter that the council wrote. And I think there was a mistake, yes. The trails map for the Hillside, in the Hillside District Plan, should have been noted, not the road map in the HDP, because it does show the need for 2 pathways. The other thing that is exceedingly important is to have some sort of safety measures, a roundabout or extensive flashing lights at the blind curve right there on Rabbit Creek Road and Mountain Air Drive. One child who I know was hit by a car some years ago getting off the bus because
Ms. Holmes?
Yes,
Ms.
time
Holmes,
is up.
your 3 minutes for public testimony has ended.
Sure, okay. I hope you'll read the council's letter. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony.
Okay.
Hello, is this Michelle?
It is. I was just pausing the live testimony.
Yes, this is the Planning and Zoning Commission calling for public testimony in case 2023-59. Are you testifying for the Community Council?
Yes, I am testifying for Rabbit Creek Community Council.
Okay, you'll have 5 minutes to testify. Please state your full name for the record, and you can begin.
Hello, my name is Michelle Turner, and I'm testifying on behalf of Rabbit Creek Community Council. First of all, thank you very much for allowing me to testify on this very important issue. This information or this testimony reiterates what was provided in the Rabbit Creek Community Council letter that is part of your planning packet. The first thing I want to say is that the Mountain Air Drive Extension Project is a critical link connecting our neighborhoods, schools, and providing secondary egress in events of an emergency. And as somebody who lives off of Rabbit Creek and who was very close, within 2 miles to a wildfire many years ago, it's having that emergency egress is really an important safety measure. I did want to summarize a few points, and I believe that Diane Holmes already mentioned several of these. The first thing is, for our safety standards, we want to make sure that there is a posted 20-mile-an-hour school zone with flashing lights. That will be important for children getting on and off buses and accessing the school. Additionally, separating paths on both sides of the road, one paved path, one unpaved path, would be important to allow pedestrian and bicycle use of this roadway. We would also recommend use of green infrastructure for drainage rather than curbs and gutters to help eliminate risk of damage to that infrastructure. We recommend designing safe crossings for non-motorized users at Rabbit Creek Road. We understand that high speeds and short sight lines are a safety problem at that intersection with Mountain Air Drive, and in most of the roads along Hillside or within Hillside, it's necessary to have a lower speed limit in order to maintain safety on those roads. We would recommend having a new location entrance for the Bear Valley Elementary School that does not impact drainage easements or the septic system. And I want to go ahead and provide a little bit more information on those points that I just mentioned. And please let me know when I have exceeded my time. So the first thing is support for a design speed of 25 miles per hour for the road itself. And we recommend that this is, Rabbit Creek Community Council endorses a recommendation to request a waiver allowing a design speed and a posted speed of 25 miles per hour rather than a faster speed. Vehicle speed is a main determining factor in severity of injuries in cases of a crash, with mortality for pedestrians and bicyclists increasing exponentially at higher speeds. As this is a relatively short collector road leading into a narrow strip paved neighborhood streets, a 25 mile per hour speed limit is appropriate. As I had mentioned earlier, a 20-mile-an-hour school zone is appropriate with flashing lights consistent with schools across the Anchorage area. And I believe Diane mentioned the unfortunate death of an individual at Hanshu Middle School, where the speed limit was reduced to 20 miles an hour only after somebody was struck and killed. Regarding design alternatives, we recommend using a green infrastructure design for drainage as opposed to using curbs and gutters. Ditches and natural infiltration are a standard for this area. Curbs and gutters accelerate runoff to creeks and are inappropriate for this area. We recommend using improvements at the Rabbit Creek Road intersection, requesting a safe crossing of Rabbit Creek Road be added to the project. Again, this is a safety issue for people using the area, in particular children who are accessing the school. Additionally, speed mitigation measures at the intersection are important, and we want to emphasize that the current speeds can create hazards at the intersection at all times, not just school drop-off and pickup times. Because of the road sight lines, the increased speeds create little time for people who are driving through traffic to stop for turning vehicles and crossing pedestrians. As I had mentioned earlier, the location of a new entrance for the Bear Valley Elementary School is important. That would allow the project to avoid impacts to existing drainage easements and avoid impacts to the septic system at Bear Valley School. Again, to support non-motorized access, pathways are needed on both sides of the road. It is a municipal collector, and Title I ordinances require pedestrian conductivity with
Ms.
special
Turner?
emphasis on safety near roads.
Excuse me,
Or near-
your 5 minutes for public testimony has ended.
Okay, thank you.
I see that we do have a question from a member of the commission. Commissioner Gardner?
Yes, thank you. Ms. Turner, I was curious, we heard from a number of members in the public here in person earlier today expressing a reference for the alternative route B for a variety of reasons. I didn't see a specific discussion in your letter with respect to the potential route options, which I guess I would take that to mean that the community council kind of supports the recommended preferred route A, but I'm curious to hear from you if that's the case, and if so or if not, kind of what in general the Rabbit Creek Community Council's perspective is with respect to the two potential routes.
Well, the Rabbit Creek Community Council did not express a preference regarding the route, so I hesitate to express a preference in this forum.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Is there anyone else wishing to speak on this item? Seeing none, we will return to the petitioner for rebuttal.
Potentially depends on the questions. Yeah, I can address a few of those points from Rabbit Creek. We actually have a few slides if we can switch over to the computer. I'll let you take this one, Stephanie.
So the installation of a reduced speed school zone, which was one of the requests from the Rabbit Creek Community Council, this falls under the authority of the municipal traffic engineer and is directly related to volumes of students walking to a facility. We have been working with the traffic engineering department and also working with the school district to try to design this road in such a fashion that it will support a safe walking route, and we can work with them to identify how this can be evaluated during design development. It is not something that we can unilaterally decide, though, because all traffic control devices are managed, operated, and installed by the municipal traffic engineering department.
There has been a lot of public feedback about two pathways. The standards adopted by the municipality of Anchorage only justifies or only includes a pathway on one side, and that's what's included in our project. Additional pathway would require additional right-of-way, and that does cause issues with federal funding. As a federally funded project, we have to follow the Uniform Act of Right-of-Way Acquisitions and Relocations, and that gives rights to property owners. The government can't just step in and take property. Part of that process is authority and necessity, and we justify necessity of acquiring property from property owners from adopted standards and guidelines. Like I said, the adopted standards from the municipality is a single pathway, so that's what we can justify with the project with our right-of-way acquisitions. If on projects the municipality is interested in doing two pathways on each side, they would need to adopt a standard for such.
Taking those points as one as that latter point, does alternate B provide for a greater right-of-way that would already give that space?
No. So while Route B, you could be centered within an existing right-of-way, even the slopes and the pathway would all be going outside of the right-of-way. The right-of-way, existing right-of-way is not wide enough for a roadway and a pathway and
Okay.
slopes.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. So the next point that they brought up a couple times was curb and gutter. We would like to use ditches as much as possible for the project, and as our typical section. There are portions in the south section where the road is already there and a lot of homes have already been developed, where we'll be considering different ways to make sure our right-of-way is as narrow as possible so we're not actually acquiring people's homes. In those locations, we may consider curb and gutter, but we'll have to figure that out as we continue the design. The intention is to be doing ditches as much as possible, and that will be primarily what the project will have.
Commissioner Strike?
Thank you, and through the chair. Curb and gutter. We've got a rural setting, mountain, winter. Can you identify any other areas at that same altitude on the hillside using curb and gutters? And without looking at, say, a subdivision such as like Prominence Point or something, but can you name any other rural roads of that type using curb and gutters?
I can't say that I'm super familiar with what all the different roads are up there, so I can't really answer that question. I can say...
And serviced by a rural road?
Right. We'll definitely be using, if we do use curb and gutter, it will be as much, or as little as possible.
I've been, as long as I've been up here, those curb and gutters, especially the curbs, will probably last about 2 seasons. They'll be taken out by the snow plows in glaciation. Okay.
Yep. Okay. Another one of the questions was the crossings at Rabbit Creek Road. Unfortunately, the scope of the project is specifically for Mountain Air Drive, so there is limitations on how far beyond we can go with the project and its funding. The other issue with it is there isn't any existing facilities on Rabbit Creek to connect to. And then also there's some sight distance issues on Rabbit Creek, so guiding people across the road on a bend could be issues as well. They mentioned in their letter also access to Bear Valley Elementary School. As I mentioned during our presentation, we are working with the Anchorage School District to improve how much the traffic is backing up. As it exists now, when school gets out, there's about a 15-minute period where traffic is actually backing up into Mountain Air Drive and a little bit even to Rabbit Creek. So that's where a lot of that concern comes from. The ASD is currently working with a consultant to redesign their parking area, and we'll do what we can with the project, and we're coordinating with them to try to improve their traffic flow and how much that impacts Mountain Air Drive. And they also brought up some septic systems that we're also aware of and we will be avoiding. I'll let you take this one, Stephanie.
So they also mentioned a couple reference to guiding plans and documents. We do agree that we need to update the reference to the trails map and the Hillside District Plan. As far as the non-motorized plan, there was nothing within the document to support that the plan didn't identify priorities outside of downtown and midtown.
I'm sorry, we've reached our 10 minutes. But I do see a question in the queue from Commissioner Strike.
Yeah, I'd like to hear you finish the commentary regarding the Rabbit Creek Community Council piece, and specifically to the guiding plans and documents.
So the non-motorized plan doesn't specifically call out any projects in this area. However, the bike plan and the pedestrian plan did. And so we included those references, even though when the non-motorized plan was adopted by the Assembly, it technically superseded those two documents. So we still wanted to acknowledge that there are local community concerns there, but there's nothing in the documentation within the non-motorized plan to say that it didn't account for all of Anchorage. And in fact, there's maps for Eagle River, for Hillside, for all these different areas of identified priorities. So I don't know that I can make the statement, agree with the statement within the letter from the Rabbit Creek Community Council. In the Hillside Subarea Transportation Plan, we did a lot of research and digging into this. It was provided to us. It is a document from 2006 that was done in accordance with the traffic department at the municipality and with the Hillside area, but it was never an adopted plan. And many of the references are outdated, and that is why we did not include it as an official document, just because it was never officially adopted as a municipal document like all of the other plans and policies that were in place.
Thank you. Are there, Commissioner George?
Thank you. Through the chair, I just was hoping that you could comment briefly on the request from the community council regarding the speed of the road. I see on the design criteria that it's proposed at 25 miles an hour, but standard is 35. And I note that when we talked earlier about the grade, there's a cross section that shows that at one point there's an 8.6% grade down a crossing of a bridge that's about 50 foot high, and then coming straight back up into a school zone possibly area. I know the quickest route between 2 points is a straight line, but also that tends to create excess speed. And so what will be done here to keep folks, if it's posted at 25, going 25? Sometimes when you design a road, folks drive what the road is designed for, not necessarily what it's posted. Thank you.
Thank you. So yeah, part of our design, so as you mentioned, and as we mentioned in the report, the standard for this road is actually 35 miles an hour, and that's what it should be. The design team did have concerns with a speed being posted that high. That's why we reached out to the municipality's traffic engineer and asked for a reduced speed of 25 miles an hour. The best way to slow people down is to design to a lower speed. That way, from right off the bat, you have a lower speed than instead of trying to slow them down when they've already been going faster. Part of the design will actually have a little bit tighter curves. Those curves that are on Route A have been designed for 25 miles an hour rather than 35. That's kind of the main technique we can use. Other things would be clearing only to as far as we actually need for the project. It kind of gives it a more narrow, tighter feel, which helps slow down people as well. Is there any other points you can think of or calming? Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Strike?
Yes, thank you, and through the chair. Thank you for taking and anticipating and putting the preparatory remarks directly to the comments and to the correspondence from the Rabbit Creek Community Council. Very helpful and directive. Love to see that. But what I would like to do through the chair is making sure that this is one body, and whatever decision this body makes as it moves forward in the process, I'd like to see the letter from the Rabbit Creek Community Council and the responses that have developed here that we've seen here attached. So that shows that this commission at least reviewed the Rabbit Creek Community Council's concerns, and whether we address and or whatever, but we connect the responses that the petitioner has presented so that they can go hand in hand, if that's appropriate. My concern is that there are two separate documents in a package that gets presented to the assembly, and they're not necessarily connected unless the single party connects them. I'd like to connect them here.
Commissioner Strike, I might ask that you wait and make a motion in a little while after we see if there are any further questions. Seeing no other questions from the commission, I will go ahead and close the public hearing. What is the will of the body? Commissioner Strike has made a motion.
Thank you. And in the case 2023-0059 to approve the alternative 2, alignment A, direct route preferred identified in the context-sensitive solution design study reports for the AMATS Mountain Air Drive extension, subject to the conditions shown on pages 8 and 9 of the staff report.
Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Gardner. Commissioner Strike, would you like to speak to your motion?
My initial reactions is mixed. I'm torn between the two, alternative A and B. I've got a concern with the identified alignment A direct with the 10% grade in a mountain not near Arctic, but winter conditions. That 10% grade of any sustained length is steep. I'm used to traveling in the Potter Valley area where I think over 3.5 miles, the average grade there is 7.5%. And so now we're looking at a 10% with a road service by a rural road service and not directly by the municipality. And so I'm concerned with the grade level that this alternative approach identifies, and so I'm not sure how I'm leaning necessarily in voting on that regard. And so I'd like to hear anything else from the other commissioners.
Would anyone else like to speak to this motion? Commissioner Ron?
Thank you, Chair, and appreciate Commissioner Strike for putting forward the motion and entertaining further discussion. Also appreciate the information provided by the applicant as well as the public testimony. With respect to alternatives A versus B, I'm leaning most heavily on the work that was done by the design and project management team, most specifically the selection criteria summary table, Table 1 in the design study report, where they do line out the 10 selection criteria. And based on those selection criteria, it's clear to me that option A has the preferences as listed. That said, notwithstanding the public testimony we heard tonight and the interest around alternative B for future potential consideration, I intend to support the motion as stated, given the work that's been done in looking at both those alternatives and the conclusions that have been reached by the professionals.
Is there any further discussion? Commissioner George?
Thank you. Through the chair, I'd like to echo the previous speaker's comments about the work and the responses that are included in the report. I do appreciate that DOT has been responsive to many of the concerns raised by the community council and others that have provided testimony. I feel that there's still a strong possibility that a school zone can be added here, that the school district will have meaningful input. You know, there's mention of an $8 million bond coming up here in the next few years for the reconfiguration of that parking lot and access. I think some of those issues are down the road, can be solved as this gets constructed here in the next 5 years, hopefully. I would just like to note that I do have a little bit of pause about having a direct route with a considerable down and up grade in the wintertime, as was echoed by one of the previous speakers. That one does concern me a little bit. I think folks tend to drive what a road is designed for rather than what it's posted as I said before. And sight lines are important here, but they're also really important when you can see a long distance. Folks tend to accelerate, and then if you're hit by a school zone, that can be questionable for ability to navigate that safely. I think one of the items that was brought up in testimony actually really stuck with me, and that was that Route A is approximately 30 seconds quicker. I don't know if that's precise or an estimate, but it reminded me of why we're doing this in the first place, and that is to provide quick access for emergency relief. If there's a fire, if there's an ambulance that needs to get to somebody, 30 seconds is a big deal when you have a 4-minute service time target. And I think that that's definitely worth taking into account. So I just would like to leave my colleagues with that. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, we will call for a vote. That motion passes. Thank you to everyone who appeared to testify today. We will now move on to our second case, which is 2023-0086. May we have the presentation from staff? Sure. We will take a 3-minute break. And all right, seeing that everyone is here, we will go ahead and go back to our second case. May we have staff's presentation, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, everybody. Tonight, I'll be talking a little bit about technical edits to Title 21 regarding the downtown code update, which just passed recently. This is pretty much a cleanup ordinance to just do some housekeeping, fix some broken links, deal with some errors, that some things that got left out during the publication process. So I'll go through this quickly, and then I'd be glad to answer any questions. So to start out, the overview of changes is outlined on pages 1 to 3 in the packet. So that's 1 to 3 of 22 of item G2. And I'm just going to go through this table pretty quickly and just kind of give a high-level overview of these. And I apologize that it's a bit difficult to see on the screen. So first to start, before the code update that recently went through, Anchorage had a pretty complicated design system downtown dating back to the 70s and the 80s. And so one of the things that the code update did was change that, and as it did that, it sort of broke a few links to other pieces of the code where, for example, if there had been a variance to that system, it might have gone to the Urban Design Commission or the Planning and Zoning Commission. And so in going back, we discovered that some of those links still existed. So because this section no longer applies, a lot of the links, and now it's been updated with a different system of bulk form, a lot of the links didn't work. And so you'll see in Chapter 2 of Title 21, there's a lot about boards, commissions, and municipal administration. So it says which boards have which responsibility to do what. And so this cleanup was basically saying, since there are no longer variances from those particular bulk standards for downtown, they can be removed from this table. And really just clarifying that certain types of variances will go before you, the Planning and Zoning Commission. Other types of variances will go before the Urban Design Commission. So it wasn't really a substantive change, but just clarifying and in line with the general practice of where different types of variances go. Next, there were just some references to airport height. As I mentioned during the work session, Anchorage has a set of height regulations that apply to the entire city that are based on the FAA, which are based on Ted Stevens International, Merrill Field, and JBER, and it's really just about height limits based on aircraft safety and that sort of thing. So we in the downtown code we had updated that, and so then there were some broken links where Chapter 11 referred to Chapter 6, but the wrong section, and then later Chapter 6 referred to Chapter 11, the wrong section, so some of that is cleaning those up. A number of changes came to the use table, and some of these were just during the publication process, some uses got left out. One of them was parking structures, so if you look in Chapter 11 right now, parking of any type is not allowed, and that was not the intention of the code process or, at any point, there was a limitation on surface lots, but we really wanted to make sure that parking structures were accommodated. So there's now putting parking structures back into the code is now included. There are also some changes to marijuana testing where it was permitted downtown, but everywhere else in code it's a T, which is a special marijuana permit. So we just changed that back to that. There's some requirements for single family that weren't worded very well in the original code, and now it simply says single family. If it's in certain zones, it needs to be accessed from an alley and on a lot, 2,000 square feet or smaller, just kind of breaking that up so it's a little bit clearer. and removing some specific uses standards for commercial use downtown, and removing use-specific standards for parking lots downtown, because we sort of simplified that and just went to a parking structure is allowed, whereas previously we had a special use that says parking is allowed, but parking lots are not allowed, so this sort of simplified that piece. As I mentioned before, some more references to airport height, so Chapter 11, Chapter 6, just making sure those links work. And then in some of the development and design standards, a lot of these came out of comments from people who were looking through the code, and they discovered that it wasn't exactly clear. One good example is that the downtown code right now requires certain modulations to the building based on the width of a right-of-way, and as written before this proposal, it wasn't clear what happens when the right-of-way is specifically 70 feet. So we said up to 70 feet you have to do X, above 70 feet you have to do Z, but what happens if your right-of-way is exactly 70 feet? That wasn't clear, so we had to fix that. There was something about the way the modulation works and when you do some bulk form reductions. So we clarified that only 20 feet or 10% of the bulk reduction is allowed to touch the facade, not is required to touch the facade. Nothing has to touch the facade. We deleted restriction that towers couldn't be closer than 20 feet to each other, and that came from comments we heard from a lot of places that tower separation on one property or separate properties is really dealt with by the building code. So this was sort of a duplicative rule that might have created sort of an uncertain situation if two property owners were both trying to build towers, but one built first and then they sort of got more property rights than the one who built second. And talking about entries to buildings, we clarified some of that. We deleted text about snow guard around the base of a building, applying to window calculations, and then we added changed something about tree grates, the grate that goes over sort of a tree at the base, to emphasize that if you have a tree and a planter, for example, you don't really need a tree grate. It wasn't clear before. Tree grate, of course, is to protect the tree from people walking on it and things being put on it. So we just wanted to remove something that might have created an undue burden that wouldn't have really been solving the intent of that regulation. Non-conforming lots, we removed a reference to non-conforming lots. There are no lot size minimums in downtown now, so there's no need to go through a non-conforming lot process because every lot is now conforming in terms of area. And there was another question, this is sort of a clarification piece. So I've mentioned a few times, downtown went from this sort of bulk form standards about dimensions to a simpler standard that says above a certain height threshold you have to modulate your building, but it's a little more flexible. Each zone has a different threshold, and it wasn't clear in the text what happens or what that's called above that threshold, the tower, where the tower begins. So in this code, when we're talking about the tower, we're talking about the threshold above a certain height in B2C and B2B and B2A. So that was the change, just to emphasize that this in this section is the tower. There's a question during the work session, doesn't apply to a cell phone tower or a communications tower. And then another thing that we added to the packet this evening is just sort of another housekeeping thing. In the table, it lists a parking structure as a residential use. Unless you're a car, it is not a residential use, so it's a commercial use. We changed that, and we left justified the commercial marijuana uses. That's sort of a bit of a formatting thing. So I'd be glad to answer any questions if anybody has any.
Are there any questions for staff? Commissioner Strike?
Thank you, and through the chair. There is a letter from the Department of Transportation outlining their comments on this change, and it's approximately a one-page letter. Do you have a copy? From Dave Whitfield, current planning manager.
Through the chair, from Dave Whitfield at DOT, or was it
from DOT, State of Alaska?
I don't have
I'm sorry, it was to David Whitfield at the MOA. I'm sorry. But my point to here is it's from Mark Eisenman, and he raises some concerns on easements, and I'm trying to draw the correlation of the, I'm trying to correlate the changes. His concerns with the action being taken here, are his actions misdirected, or how are they applicable?
Through the chair, I don't have a copy of that in front of me, but I was looking at it before. My take on that was it was a sort of a general comment from DOT, and they're talking about, excuse me.
Right-of-ways and driveways.
And when I read this, and I might be mistaken, so they say Alaska Department of Transportation has reviewed the following zoning cases and has no comments. And then they list this comment. And then they do go into this long section about access. I saw the same thing and I thought, I don't understand what they're commenting about, but that must be their just disclaimer, right?
I'm doing this, and I'm just trying to see if you've been able to correlate them. I still can't correlate it.
Through the chair, it seems to me that maybe they're just offering this as good advice that they'd like everybody to follow. So we will keep that in mind. Thank you.
Commissioner Gardner?
Yes, thank you. My question is with respect to the recent corrections, I guess, in supplementary packet 1, updating the table, or the title of those tables. Was that just a correcting kind of a typo in how the packet was assembled, or is that an additional kind of amendment that's being proposed?
Through the chair, no, that's just in formatting the table, it was just using the wrong header. It had residential use, and later there'd be another one that said commercial use, and it just got kind of, honestly, I probably was putting the table together and I deleted the wrong one.
Okay, so just to confirm, that's not a proposed amendment to be included as part of the overall, these corrections. This is a typo in a sense when you assembled the packet.
Through the chair, yes. Parking structure is a commercial use. There's no proposal here to make it a residential use or move it from one to the other. It's just a typo.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions? Seeing none, are there any members of the public here wishing to testify on this item? Seeing none, I will ask if staff has a rebuttal.
No, thank you. I'm glad to answer any other questions, Madam Chair.
Then we will go ahead and close the public hearing. What is the will of the body? Moved by Commissioner Strike and seconded by Commissioner Eber. Commissioner Strike, would you like to speak to your motion?
Yes, I'll read the motion here that I move in case 2023-0086 to recommend to the Anchorage Assembly approval of the technical edits to Title 21 regarding the Downtown Conduct Code update. And in speaking to those, I'll wait for a second. Go ahead.
Yes, would you like to speak to
and I concur with the staff's findings on the recommended findings 1, 2, and 3. I would add one more finding, and that is, while this was public testimony, no testimony was provided.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we will call for a vote. That motion passes. And I believe our final order of business is a motion to adjourn. Moved by Commissioner Polis, seconded by Commissioner Gardner. Are there any objections? Seeing no objections, we will adjourn. Thank you.